We've been programmed since childhood to unconsciously suppress our emotions. Big emotions are not acceptable, or when I show big emotions, I get neglected or I'm ignored. And so it's easier and safer for me just to bury those emotions. And then as adults, we don't even realize we're doing it anymore. It just gets tucked away.
Hi, guys. I am really excited for you to hear this week's episode with our special guest, Sam Kalawart. She is a certified health coach and breathwork facilitator. She has over 400 hours of teaching and training. She creates an experience using healing through mind body techniques, nervous system practices, breathwork, and mindfulness. She is amazing. I feel really energized by my discussion with her today because, using breath work to heal the body is such an important part of health and looking at that mind body connection. And we really can't talk about health when we can't discuss some of the traumas, experience feelings that might be, causing dysregulation in your body. And I think you guys will really enjoy this episode. I know I did, and I'm going to put some of the practices she talked about in this episode into things that I use. So I think you guys will too. Enjoy the episode. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Thick Thigh Save Lives podcast. I'm Kelsey, and I'm here with Sam Kalawart today. Sam, I am so excited to have you on and share your specialty with all of our listeners.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here and jump in. I think that this topic of nervous system healing is just so needed right now. And I'm really thankful that more and more people are beginning to realize the importance of self regulating your nervous system on a continuous basis.
Yeah, this conversation has really picked up recently, which I'm so thankful for because I think a lot of people don't realize how much dysregulation they feel on a daily basis and how much that's affecting different aspects of their life, how that's affecting their digestive system, how that's affecting how they're feeling on a daily basis. And then there's like a secondary part of having like a lot of shame for feeling really tired or feeling like bad in general. So I'm super excited to just kind of like uncover what that looks like for people and try and give them some actionable tips at the end
Yeah,
that they might be able to use.
absolutely. And honestly, you couldn't have put it better when we are put under so much pressure, especially women having to run the household, have careers, have children, essentially having to take care of everyone in our lives. And ultimately, it leaves us feeling extremely burnt out. And it does affect every aspect of our body, of our mental and emotional state. And it can be very small, subtle shifts that people don't even realize. And a lot of times, they've been operating out of these states for months, years, decades. So it truly becomes your norm. And that's what's the most difficult part about beginning to just bring awareness and address these things is to have that subtle compassion and begin to recognize that within yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So you've been doing workshops in inner transformation for a while now. Can you take me back to how you got started in this journey that led you to where you are now?
Yeah, it's definitely through my own healing, like so many others, and becoming very passionate about this topic because I have been sick since I can remember. So, growing up as a child, constantly having colds, flus, earaches. And then as a teenager, it kind of morphed into digestive issues, chronic constipation, eczema, psoriasis, and then weird like stomach cramps and chronic fatigue. And so it just kind of slowly crept in. And then at 15, that's when I really had my big wake up call. I was going to the mall with my mom one day on like a Saturday. Everything was totally normal. And I noticed that the right or the left side of my face just felt kind of tingly and a little numb, and that my left eye was watering a ton. And I didn't really think too much of it, but I just noticed it. We went home, I took a nap, I woke up, and the left side of my face was completely paralyzed. Like it was like that, the drastic change. My parents thought I was having a stroke. So they actually, rushed me to the ER, and the doctor checked me out and confirmed that it wasn't a stroke, but I was experiencing Bell's palsy, which is facial paralysis. And at 15, that's extremely rare, but put under tremendous stress, prolonged stress, it can happen. And I am someone who just grew up having a very sensitive nervous system with all of these accumulating manifestations of physical imbalance and disease slowly piling on, not realizing what was really happening. Of course, that mind body connection was not discussed, did not have that awareness back then. And so that was my biggest wake up call at 15 of experiencing that and going through 6 months of facial paralysis, which, of course, at that time was extremely traumatic. And it was a really dark aspect and chapter of my life that I look back on. But I'm very thankful I went through that because I really began to understand that, okay, I can't solely trust allopathic medicine, rely on them for my health and wellness and well being. I need to start to take things into my own hands. And so at 20, when I started having panic attacks to the point of blacking out, I started questioning things. And that's when I started to really seek out, how can I help and heal my own body? And I started listening to podcasts about the paleo diet. And back then, it wasn't called biohacking, but essentially that's what it was. And just listening to how I can use different supplements and exercise and food to begin to optimize my state of being. And that's where my passion for this really grew. And then slowly started incorporating all these things. And then in my late 20s, fast forward, I began to experience another downward spiral in my health and had Bell's palsy again, this time on the right side of my face. And I was under tremendous stress with my job at the time. And then started experiencing debilitating health and chronic illness after I had implants put in. And so, breast implant illness is also a huge part of my story and something that took a long time to diagnose. But essentially, it was just another stressor on my body, like causing chronic infection that led to a breakdown in my health. And that's when I really woke up and started experiencing mind body healing with modalities like breathwork that really began to transform everything in my life. And so beginning to heal my mental, emotional body, my past traumas, that is what really, along with all of the biohacks and the diet and all of the things, started to bring me back into a state of vitality and wellness. And I can say, looking back now, I'm thankful I went through it all. But it was a really tough journey, but it did teach me so many lessons about how we can heal and optimize our bodies. And a lot of times that means getting back to basics and simply slowing down.
Mm. That's really insightful too that you had a physical reaction from chronic stress at the age of 15. It's like prolonged stress at such an early age is really like eye-opening. And I think a lot of people have a lot of judgment when they think about some of their prolonged stress, but I love that you said like I have a sensitive my central nervous system is really sensitive. Like I like to say it as like a really feeling person, but a lot of women I think have a lot of judgment to the level of stress that they're allowed to have before they acknowledge that they are under chronic stress. It's like there's this like arbitrary gauge where like, are you stressed enough though? And it's
Yeah,
like like
exactly.
like only you decide that. Only you know how you feel. And there are no qualifying events or non-qualifying events that decide if you are stressed enough to experience a physical reaction or if it's too stressful to have to make a change or to address some of these issues. It's like you guys, you are the only person that lives in your body and ultimately you are the only one that knows that. I'm glad you brought up
Absolutely.
breast implant illness too, because we had an expert come on to talk about that, and we've like hit it, you know, pretty hard because I think a lot of people don't know. Um, it's weird because it's very common, but a lot of people don't know the significance of the physical effects on breast implant illness.
Absolutely. And I was working in a plastic surgeon's office, and as though I was quote unquote holistically minded, eating healthy, taking the supplements, exercising, doing all of those things for my mental, emotional, and physical well being, I didn't think twice about putting silicone in my body, but it's like, hello, wake up. Over time that slowly breaks down. And for me, everyone's different, but for me, I started experiencing candida infections almost immediately within weeks of having the breast implants in. And then my specific implants were actually recalled in 2019 for causing a type of lymphoma in women. So cancer. And I actually personally know many women who got breast implants and a couple years later either got breast cancer or different types of cancer, ovarian cancer, throat cancer, different types of cancer in their body. And it's just undeniable the connection between having silicone in your body, whether it's saline or silicone that breaks down over time and causing excessive stress on your nervous system through infections, mold, inflammation. All of those things physically affect the nervous system.
Yeah, it's incredible. So that's your journey with how you came to, um, you know, work in the mindfulness space, and then how did you start working with women or sharing your experience?
Yeah, so it was back in 2017 that I began to work with women and started as a health coach, working with intuitive eating and optimizing and lowering stress levels through the food that you eat. So that's where I started. And then slowly, when I started incorporating myself, practices like mindfulness, breath work, different some somatic practices, I began to introduce that to the women I was working with, and then just kind of slowly snowballed over time. So I started seeing women out of my home in my community. And then I eventually got my own office. And then I was working with and seeing clients one on one for many years. And then I started doing workshops and then the retreats. And so it just organically grew. But it was through consistency. And then, of course, my passion for it, which was my own story, fueling everything along the way. And I just went all in. So I have, my own podcast and again, hosting consistent events for people to come and experience breath work and mindfulness and begin to deepen their own mind body connection through workshops here in Grand Rapids. And that's how I began to work with women.
I can't love that enough because the I talk to, a lot of people, bring a lot of people on the podcast, and I find that people who have that personal experience and who have just, women entrepreneurs who have built, you know, this whole thing based on that personal experience. They're like, I feel this so strongly and this has changed my life in such a significant way that I need to share it with every person around me, is just like the ultimate power right there, because like that's how we got started too. I was like, I love this, like, fitness has changed my life, get creating this amazing community has changed my life, like people need all the support, and it just becomes like, I need to share this with every person around me because they need to experience how good you can feel. And breathwork is one of those, and mental health is one of those that, like, I am personally so passionate about because that's where my background is, in mental health. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, I know you talk about how mental health is physical health. Can you explain like how the mind body connection works?
Yeah, absolutely. So, nervous system dysregulation ultimately can come from several different things within our lives. Sometimes it is traumas, sometimes it is illness, sometimes it is something that happened to us in our childhood, other times it's prolonged stress and or suppressing our emotions or relationship conflicts or just the tasks of our day growing and growing and feeling overwhelmed from that. And so these daily stressors, along with our thoughts and our beliefs about the stress itself and how we perceive it, our mind cannot tell the difference between something that's happening in the present moment versus something that's happened in the past or the future. And so a nervous system that is stuck in dysregulation, it actually sends signals of fear and stress to the mind, even if there is not a quote unquote real threat present. And so, because of this, people get stuck in perpetual fight, flight, or freeze responses where they feel either that they are in panic, they are feeling irritated, they are feeling frustrated, they are feeling a lot of anxiety, worry, concern, which is that fight, flight, or fear response. And then conversely, on the other end of the spectrum, we have the freeze, which is disassociation, numbness, shutdown, helplessness, not feeling motivated. And so between these responses, our nervous system again gets stuck within some of those different ways of being, and it becomes difficult for us to shift out of that. We can't return to baseline essentially. And baseline for us at homeostasis, balance within the nervous system, is calmness and connection, feeling settled within our body, feeling grounded, feeling open, curious, compassionate about ourselves and the world around us. And ultimately, of course, we want to operate from that state of being. But again, many of us are perpetually stuck within these other states within the nervous system, and it quite literally controls our physiology, our biology. It begins to send cortisol, the stress hormone, and that raises over time. And then again, inflammation goes up, digestive issues arise. We feel slow to recover from our workouts. We have chronic fatigue. We have autoimmune conditions. We have a lot of inflammation within the body. And so all of this is deeply interconnected, all beginning with, again, our mind and the thoughts, the feelings, the beliefs that we have on a daily basis. And then from there, their neurotransmitters send down the chemical responses within the body to act accordingly. And this is why we have the physical manifestations of stress, and they feel so real because they are.
That was so beautifully put. Because like a lot of times like they feel so real because they are real. We try and talk ourselves out of them even though our brain is getting constant signals that we are in distress and that we should be experiencing, fear and and essentially dysregulation going on, but we're like, no, that doesn't exist right now, or oh, that's in the past. But actually your brain is getting all of these signals and your body is reacting accordingly.
Exactly. Yes.
I want to talk about that dysregulation for a little bit. What are some of the most common signs for nervous system dysregulation in our physical health? Like, what are some of the symptoms that we can look for?
Yeah, so impaired immune function. So constantly getting sick. So, like I told you when I was a little girl, just constantly having colds, flus, earaches, always being sick. And then, of course, that can carry on into adulthood, along with digestive issues, is a really big one for many women. So, chronic constipation, feeling bloated, feeling that you have a lot of food sensitivities, not being able to go to the bathroom every day and be regular, or conversely, the other end of the spectrum, feeling like you're going all the time. A lot of times, nervousness can cause that, the loose bowels. And then chronic pain. So, this is one for me. I didn't realize that my chronic pain, my back pain, my joint pain was actually linked to my nervous system being in a perpetual state of fight or flight. And then chronic migraines and headaches is also a big one for people. TMJ, which is like that tightness that you feel within the jaw. This again, slow recovery after a workout. So you have a workout, a moderate workout, and you feel completely just done, burnt out. You feel
Mhm.
that you're dragging for the following days after that. There are so many manifestations of this. Autoimmune disease is another big one in women. And there's a reason why that out of the population, more women experience autoimmune disease than men, because a lot of times we are more sensitive to stress. And so many women who are experiencing, for example, fibromyalgia, that's really just a way to say you have a sensitive nervous system, because your nervous system is sending the alarm bells, and the body is acting accordingly, getting ready to fight, flight, or freeze. And so you experience this physical pain and numbness and tingling within the body. Neuropathy is another one. Honestly, almost every condition, including insomnia, is linked back to nervous system dysregulation.
There was a lot there because I think a lot of people have been like, "Uh-oh." Have heard some of those things, and sometimes it's very frustrating that women it's clear that women experience stress at a higher level, but our stress is treated in almost a dismissive way, and I think that it's just an honest look at the stress that you're experiencing should not be compared to your husband, your partner, men around you. Like it's just not there. And in every other way we accept this and saying like, women are more sensitive, intuitive, and can feel out the room a little bit better, are better caretakers a lot of the time. And it just becomes like, okay, we accept it in all these ways, but not in the way that we're experiencing stress differently because of that level of intuitiveness. And it's like one of those things where you come to, some of your strengths have this other side of it where if not cared for appropriately can become detrimental to your health.
Absolutely. Truly caring for your nervous system, it should be a non negotiable in your life.
Yeah.
Just like exercise, just like eating healthy, caring for your mental and emotional state needs to be a non negotiable.
Absolutely. But it's like it's the whole trend of like if you are caring for yourself, you're not a good mother. You're taking your time for your gym. You are dismissive of the people around you. You need to be selfless. And it's like, wait a minute, all
Yeah.
of these are very counterproductive to what actually needs to happen. And that brings me kind of into my next question about like women are marketed really strong for fad diets and what the newest trend diet can be. And can these act like this marketing and just being exposed to these messages all the time, can this actually be harmful to our nervous system health?
Absolutely. It's the constant comparison. It's going on social media
Yeah.
and seeing that comparison of other women, along with now it's January 1st when you start the new diet, or you just had a baby, you need to bounce back. So, what happens is you either have the comparison or you have internal pressure. So, you're putting all this pressure on yourself to look a certain way, to eat a certain way, to be perceived as a certain way. And because of that, internally, again, your thoughts, your beliefs, your feelings fuel what's happening within the body and within the nervous system. And then that sends that cascade of cortisol, the stress hormone. And no amount of diet and exercise can help you if cortisol is too high. Excessive cortisol is linked to weight gain, especially around the midsection. So when you form that tire around the midsection that's so hard to lose, that's cortisol. And so, yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree that that comparison and that internal pressure that we put on ourselves from all the new health fads and diets out there and biohacks can be counterproductive for sure.
Do you have any tips for, to kind of check some of that comparison, or even for like some of us who are spending a lot of time on social media? What are some of the things that you practice to kind of check yourself when you start to feel that pull towards a comparison?
Absolutely. So digital detox, that is like my godsend is
I
getting
know. I
off
tell
social
people that
media.
all the time.
Yeah, yes, like especially for me, so it's I have parameters. So I don't get on my phone until Instagram, social media until 10 a.m. and then I'm off it by 5 p.m. at the end of the day. And then on Saturday and Sunday, unless I'm hosting a workshop or a retreat, those are my days to be with my family. And so I'm not on it at all. So that's like a mental break for me. And then if there are certain women or influencers that I feel I'm getting activated by, like I'm like, ooh, why? Why do I feel that internal pressure to look like them or to do what they're doing? Then I typically will just unfollow them if I'm starting to feel some stickiness there, activation. And so setting boundaries around social media, I believe is so important. And then one time a year, I'll typically take a longer, like week long type of Instagram break, social media break. And that is incredibly healing for your nervous system and for your mental health, of course.
I thank you for those tips. I've been thinking about a break for a little bit now because I think that I've personally been feeling just like I'm like, what is that? It's like this like jarring like nervousness about like checking things and like going through like my messages were not aren't always positive. And even the ones that are, it's just like it's a pull. And I was like thinking about this recently about that maybe a prolonged break, like just like a little bit, like a week or so, might be a good thing to kind of reset. So I'm glad, personally, I'm glad you brought that up
Yeah.
because I think a lot of us could benefit from maybe setting some of those parameters and just seeing how it goes, like seeing how it works, seeing how we feel. And it might feel awkward at first, like anything that's going to have a change, or you might feel like, even, do you think you might feel even an increase in anxiousness with like not checking some of those things until you have the ability to do so? And
Yeah.
like maybe work, just like working through those.
Absolutely. And understanding as well how addicted your mind is to social
Yeah.
media. You get the dopamine hit. And so people are now showing that for some, for those who fall into addictive patterns easily, phone addiction to social media is as detrimental, for example, as drinking for a mental and emotional health. And so truly, we get that same dopamine hit as if we're pulling down the slot machine in gambling as we check our and scroll down and see the refresh button for our email, for our social media, for our messages. And we're just checking, and we don't even realize we're doing it. Our brain is just doing it automatically. And we've conditioned our mind to just constantly want that another dopamine hit, another like, another notification. And so absolutely you're going to feel a withdrawal from that. You may feel some anxiety, some feelings of FOMO, of missing out for the first few days. But I really believe that once you take that complete break, it's like, whew, why did I not do this sooner? It feels so good.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm so that's such a great comparison too, so with the slot machines, because we kind of like, it's almost been, you are better than some, with some of these addictions have been like, because they're more socially acceptable or more commonly used, it's like we don't see them as much as the addictiveness that they are, and they have some superiority to other addictions, when it's like, no, no, we're getting the same dopamine hit. Your addiction is just different. Mine is just different, and they need to be checked in different ways, of course. But I think you
Exactly.
brought up a good point about anxiety, and we've seen a major uptick in the amount of people diagnosed with anxiety. Can you just talk a little bit about the effect that anxiety has on your body?
Yeah, so it's debilitating. Anxiety is a big one. Again, it's something that I dealt with for a long time, to the point where I literally have blacked out. And this has happened to me on an airplane, having flight anxiety. It's happened to me in several occasions. And at the time, not realizing that certain patterns, certain things that I was doing were actually fueling my anxiety. Certain medications like birth control was a big one for me in my early 20s that was fueling my anxiety that I had no idea. But it is something that makes you feel very numb. You are chronically afraid of and on high alert of everything in your environment and everyone. So, because of that, you are typically closed off. Again, digestion is slowed way down because all of the blood has rushed to your arms and your hands. You feel floaty, disconnected, disassociated, out of body. Your mind could be racing. Your breath is high in your chest, it's tight, you have a lump in your throat. These are all the physical signs of anxiety and panic. And it's very, very real. And again, it's completely debilitating. I dealt with really bad anxiety during my pregnancy from the high estrogen levels. And it was tough to deal with that. And so for me, of course, I'm someone who I tried the medication back in my early 20s for anxiety. And taking the birth control pills, trying to cancel out the anxiety I was getting from them with anti-anxiety medication, and I just hated the way it made me feel. Everyone's different, but we now know there are so many natural ways that you can regulate your anxiety, you can bring it back to baseline, and that you don't have to live from that state every single day. And if anything, for me, going within, asking myself, why is my body signaling so much anxiety right now? Is there an emotion I'm avoiding? Am I out of alignment with my job? Am I out of alignment or not dealing with something in one of my relationships? Is there something that I'm physically doing to my body, not eating, fasting too long? All of those things contribute to the physical manifestation of anxiety. So, really beginning that process of just asking within and having some calm, compassionate awareness and inquiry, that's really the first step to begin addressing anxieties. Getting to the root of it, I believe, is so important.
Yeah, that's such a powerful tool too. Just like internally asking, what are, because they aren't always yelling at you. You aren't always immediately like, this is why I'm not sleeping. Bam. This is what
Mhm.
the thing is. I know personally I'm not, and don't know if I've ever shared this on the podcast, but I have panic attacks. I'm a person who experiences anxiety in a very specific way. When you interact with me, you say like you're upbeat, you have it together, you run this, you run that. But what happens is when I am not in a place where I'm like running a bunch of things and going back to back with a bunch of stuff, where I'm actually in a calmer state, I'll have a panic attack. And it's like, why right then? Like the last time I was like starting a workout and I was like, but working out by myself, I was glad to be by myself. I like just had the music going, and it was like I was just about to start. I'm like looking at the clock, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh no, I'm having a panic attack. And I was frustrated initially, because I was like, oh, this is so annoying. This isn't the time. I've only got 45 minutes. Like I have to be somewhere in an hour. I got to shower before that. And then I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You are going so fast that your body is literally shutting down, and you're annoyed that it's shutting down because you want to keep moving. That's the time to slow down and ask those questions. Like what am I specifically, even it might not just be one thing, it might be a combination of different things. But like what am I feeling particularly anxious about? What is my body trying to tell me right now? What are some things that maybe feel a little bit too heavy? And where could I let some of them go? And where could I even find some like quiet time
Yeah,
to like deal
absolutely.
with them?
And I love that you brought that up because so many women experience this. I have a workshop on my Patreon called Safety and Slowing Down, because so many of us have been operating from such a high state of hypervigilance for so long that when we do slow down, it actually feels really scary. That's when the nervous system is like, whoa, what is happening right now? And that's when we can experience panic and excessive amounts of the manifestations of anxiety within our bodies and our minds. And so many of us from childhood were conditioned to, you are not worthy, you are not valuable unless you're constantly doing and producing. And so because of that, we get conditioned and programmed to believe it, and our bodies begin to operate from that state of being. And then slowing down feels really scary, and rest feels impossible. And even when we have those moments to slow down and rest, our mind's still racing. And that's definitely a sign that it's time to disconnect, take a break, really honor yourself, but also feel what you're currently feeling. Like, not try to suppress the fear or the angst, and like really allow your body to go through the full scope of emotions and experiences. And then just remind yourself, I'm safe, I'm okay, everything's okay in this moment. Talking to your inner child, all of those can be really great things to include in during that time.
Yeah. I am gonna go into like emotions and trauma next, but I thought that's a great segue, because sometimes we don't realize that those are the messages that we have conditioned of worthiness. And that's something that I've personally been able to identify of like, you are still worthy if you're not productive. You're still worthy if you're not putting things out into the world and helping everyone fix everything right now. And I think a lot of, once we uncover some of the messages that have been um, so conditioned and kind of like so deep into the actions that we use for our daily life, into some of the reasons where we do feel, worthy, like I need to be productive at every moment to be a worthy person of love. And like that's not, our brain isn't always telling us the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. Separating from your thoughts and your feelings is so important, and realizing they are not you, because otherwise they will overtake everything.
Mm. Yeah, and you have a lot of education about suppressing emotions and trauma.
Yeah.
Do you think people often confuse the desire to be happy with distracting themselves with difficult emotions? And maybe how can we stop doing this?
Absolutely. We've been programmed since childhood to unconsciously suppress our emotions, because big emotions like
Yeah.
grief, anger, bitterness, all of those they unconsciously either we were essentially told like that's not okay, that's not appropriate, go to your room, I don't want to hear it type of thing. And
Yeah.
then so, as children we're just conditioned, okay, big emotions are not acceptable, or when I show big emotions I get neglected or I'm ignored, and so it's easier and safer for me just to bury those emotions. And so over time we bury and bury, and then as adults we don't even realize we're doing it anymore, it just gets tucked away. And it's so easy because we have work, we have our families to take care of, we have dinner to make, we have outings to go to. And so we're so busy, and we can keep our minds so busy with a movie, social media, again, family time, cooking, that bypassing those big emotions that we have is very easy. It's almost too easy now because we're so disconnected from slow living. But beginning the process of again, bringing calm, compassionate awareness towards those emotions when you do have them, and then giving yourself time and space to feel them. Of course, feeling them in every situation may not be appropriate. So if you're in a board meeting and you have someone said something to you and you have a big swell of emotions come through, that is not the time to break down and start crying in front of everyone, right? But of course, as adults, we can regulate our emotions, which is a great skill, but we have to give ourselves that ability to honor, to feel. And so, in those situations, when I am going through a big emotion or I'm in a family situation, I feel something, that's something that during my self care time, when I'm in breath work, when I'm journaling, that I can write down, that I can dig a little deeper into, that I can breathe through. And then I teach a specific type of breath work, which is called circular connected breath, in a prolonged setting where you're breathing guided by a facilitator laying down for anywhere from 40 to 60 minutes. And what happens within those sessions is that you begin to access the limbic brain through that breathing technique, which is the feeling brain. That's where we store all of our emotions, along with the nervous system and the subconscious mind, where we have been repressing. And organically, within 10 to 15 minutes, those big emotions that we've been burying down for so long, they begin to organically be liberated from the body, the mind, the heart. And so within these sessions, the workshops I guide, one-on-one clients I work with, this is when a lot of times those bigger emotions and traumas and wounds that we haven't dealt with, they come through, and you don't have to speak through it, you don't have to talk to anyone, you just feel and release and let your body let go of all of that heavy emotion that you've been holding on to. And so that typically looks like a cathartic type of session where you are releasing and expressing emotion in a big way.
Yeah, I think that's such a freeing idea that we can, if you have to suppress an emotion at a specific time, there is a safe space where you can work through that in a purposeful way, where like it isn't just I tuck this away until I break, until forever.
Exactly. Yes.
Like we can have a purposeful way to deal with some of these things, and it 100% makes sense. Like I don't know why I didn't think of this, but like
Yeah.
it makes sense that like in a safe way, in a purposeful way, we can revisit some of these things, but we have to get back to them and find a way to revisit some of them. I loved your response to, or how you've talked about on your page, the fawn response. And I think a lot of women identify themselves in some of these behaviors. Can you just explain what that looks like, first of all, and how we might notice it affecting our nervous system health?
Yeah. So it's essentially people pleasing, not being able to say no, being the yes woman to everyone in your life. Again, putting yourself in the back burner and taking care of everyone else around you, and wanting to appease everyone in your life. And so, of course, that's really detrimental over time. Mentally and emotionally, it leaves us feeling completely drained. It leaves us feeling bitter and resentful over time to those around us for not receiving that help. And so many people, many of the women I work with, they will either be deeply seated in the fawn response, or conversely, they're in the freeze response where they're completely shut down. And so a lot of times it's one or the other. For me, I never really had the fawn response. It's more of feeling very closed off to people and not trusting people because of experiences I had in my adolescence with a lot of bullying. And so I actually have the opposite problem, but over time, absolutely saying yes to everyone, not setting healthy boundaries, it leaves you burnt out. And it's incredibly exhausting. And it is something that a lot of people deal with. And I think that it can take a lot of courage. So it takes practice with defaulting in the fawn response and wanting to appease everyone. It takes practice using your voice and speaking up, because a lot of times these people have been so dismissive their entire lives that just the act of speaking up itself can feel really scary. So, giving yourself a lot of grace and patience and knowing that it's going to take likely some practice to undo a lot of those patterns that have been ingrained for so long.
Yeah. And just like anything with practice, you're going to have some times where you don't quite do it right. Like
Yeah.
either you go like really hard or it feels really awkward and it's just like, oh, okay, maybe that wasn't it. But it's like one of those things when it comes to people pleasing, I have so much compassion for people who feel the weight of this because it is exhausting trying to go outwardly please people all the time that you have no control over their response. And everyone's working through their own stuff. They're like just revolving in their own world over there that has nothing to do with you and trying to figure out ways to make them happy or to please them or to do anything that will make them feel happy. And it's just like a never ending cycle. And then trying to set boundaries around that, and trying to adjust some of that behavior can be really difficult and is not only an adjustment for you personally on how to navigate those responses, but for those around you who might feel um, thrown off.
Yeah. They're
It's
going to
at
be
the
like,
very least,
whoa. Yeah.
yeah, at the very least thrown off because they're used to a certain behavior that now they're not, not experiencing that. And it takes adjustments on both sides. But ultimately, it is so worth it because those relationships become so much more authentic to each person's needs and the back and forth when it comes to any type of relationship, a friendly relationship, an intimate relationship, any type of relationship. It is more authentic when one person isn't trying to continuously please the other one.
Absolutely. It builds respect and you begin to honor each other's boundaries, and it can actually really strengthen your relationship in a powerful way.
I one of the things that I wanted to kind of end with was we talked a lot about the importance of breath work, throughout today's podcast. But when it comes to regulating and healing dysfunction, can you leave our listeners with some basic breathwork techniques that can help them feel more balanced?
Absolutely. So it comes down to helping yourself activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is that aspect of the nervous system where growth, restoration, and healing are possible. And a major component of the parasympathetic nervous system is the vagus nerve, which runs all down through our body. And it's actually a family of neuro pathways that wander through the body that help regulate everything from our organs to, again, our nervous system. And one of the ways to stimulate this is through diaphragmatic breathing. So, breathing in through the nose, exhaling long and slow with an emphasis on your exhale. A lot of people emphasize that inhale, that big, bold breath, but when you actually change your intention to emphasizing the exhale, long, slow, soft, and not forcing or pushing it, it can be really healing. And so, doing that for a few rounds, the nasal breathing, I call it functional breathing because it's the breath pattern that you should be engaging on a consistent basis throughout your day, whether you're going for a walk, doing the dishes, driving in the car, reminding yourself to breathe through your nose and then exhale long and slow can be incredibly healing. Along with, if you want to take that a step further and put a sound to that exhale. So, one of my favorites is the VOO sound. So, VOUUUU, where you're making an extended hum, which then stimulates that vagus nerve as well and helps to put an emphasis on your exhale. So, it's inhaling through your nose exhaling, voo, and doing that for a few rounds. It sounds kind of funny, but that can be a really great way to just engage your breath, activate the parasympathetic nervous system, and then the circular connected breath I had spoke about. This is going to help with deeper seated, again, stress, tension, trauma within the body. So if you have deeper seated stuff that you have some baggage that needs to be released emotionally, that's where that circular connected breath can be really powerful in a long guided session, always with a facilitator. I know some people try to pull up a YouTube video and do this at home, but that is not a safe way to do it, because if you don't do this correctly, it can lead to you going unconscious, right? And so you don't ever want to experience that. And this is why I guide workshops on a continuous basis online and in person, because this can be a really powerful way, just once, twice a month, to experience that deeper emotional release. And so many times people tell me after those types of sessions, I feel so light emotionally, mentally. And of course, deep breathing for 45 minutes to an hour straight, you're going to feel good. You're going to have some endorphins rushing through your body and your mind. And it can just leave you feeling incredibly relaxed and reconnected to your body. And so a few minutes of breath work a day, whether that's 5, 10 minutes through a guided practice of breathing through your nose, and then once a month, or once every couple months, doing a longer breathwork session where you're emotionally cleaning out some of that baggage that you've been holding on to. Those are two modalities that are really my favorite when it comes to helping to heal and restore your nervous system on a continuous basis.
Thank you so much for those. I know that I'm going to try some of those. And that even just listening to that, our listeners are definitely going to benefit from that. As soon as you start like talking about like breathing, I'm like, okay.
Yeah,
Like, you
just
just like,
reminds you.
yeah, you just like start immediately doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love the idea of cleaning out some emotional baggage
Yeah.
because it's so necessary
Mm-hmm.
and it's just been built up. And for a lot of people who have some trauma, it's just so important to kind of move that through a little
Yeah.
bit. And this is a really a beautiful way to do that. Um, our listeners need to hear more from you. So where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at Sam_Kalawart. I have a podcast, the Soulful Podcast, and then my Patreon. So that's where you can try out these types of breath sessions. I have a 7-day free trial with the short audios, which are great for daily practice, and then the longer workshops, which again help you to heal that deeper trauma and emotional wounding. And so I have tons of different themes of workshops like inner child healing, the safety and slowing down, like I mentioned, just general nervous system healing. And that's a really great place to just begin to experiment with breath work and see how it can really impact you mentally, emotionally, and physically.
Sam, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. It's incredibly important. And guys, definitely check her out. I know I am going to go into some of these workshops because I am really energized and excited for some of that healing. But thank you so much for all of the work that you're doing because it's so important and so necessary. And I'm sure you already know helps so many people.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much. Just coming on and bringing awareness towards the mind body connection and your nervous system. I hope that it starts to plant some seeds in your listeners.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.